America, bonjour, hi Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt live from Studio West. Good morning. In this hour, I'm going to cover the 3 R's. Rain, racism, and riding with Biden. Rain, which is the story in California in a way that it has not been since the El Nino of 20 years ago. Racism, which is what is the story in Fairfax County, Virginia, and I fear throughout the United States as the educrat class comes up with new ways to punish Asian American students and hide their excellence in academics in order to advantage everyone else, because the Asian Americans are doing way too well on test scores for the educrats and the affirmative action bureaucrats and the admission office layer of power. That's got to be stopped. They've got to put an end to these standardized tests because, after all, Asian American kids, who are a minority, by the way, are doing way too much and way too well on these things. And then riding with Biden, all that slogan in 2020, riding with Biden, he got his Corvette out, and that was a big thing. Who knew that there were classified documents, stuffed in the glove compartment? I don't know that. They were in the cupboard next to the Corvette, so I assume they were in the Corvette at some point. But riding with Biden is a really difficult ride. Let me begin with rain. If you follow me on Twitter, and I hope you do, over at Hugh Hewitt, my most recent tweet links you to the rainfall totals in California. And there are 2 columns: daily totals, rainfall to date, as a percentage of the year to date, and the rainfall seasons as the percentage of the full season. All right, so the full rainfall season is July 1 to July 1. And that normally they measure the snowpack on April 1. That's when they figure out how much water California will have, because snowpack is basically reservoir water. It will melt and run off into the system. But they measure the water 2 ways. Over the course of the season, so are we at 10%? We're about halfway through the season, July 1 to January 1. We're about 53% of the way through the season. Where are we on the seasonal total? And then as a total of the whole year. And how much rain do we have in California? It's pretty extraordinary. This is to date. All right, so normals to date. In, for example, San Francisco Airport, normally, in a normal year, they would have 8.7 inches in a normal year in California, beginning on July 1 at San Francisco Airport up to today. As of today, they have 19.94 inches at San Francisco Airport. So they're at 229% of a normal year's rainfall. In Stockton, it's 231%. In Modesto, it's 231%. In Bishop, it's 362%, because Bishop usually only gets 2.32 inches of rain a year. They've had 8.3 inches of rain. In Southern California, in Santa Barbara, they normally get about 7 inches of rain. To this point of the year, they've got 14, 222%. In Burbank Airport, they're at 236%. In Fullerton, 209%. And as they get a little bit out to Palm Springs, it's only at 86% of what they normally have. So it's still dry in the desert. Riverside, though, is at 155%. There's a whole lot of rain in California. And I don't mean, we're having a little bit of a wet year. I mean, it's a year. I came back from Virginia, and I'll be here for the spring quarter. I'm teaching the spring semester this year. I do it every other year. I teach con law. So at least once every 2 years, Chapman Law School students can hear from an originalist on how to understand the Constitution. And great kids, great students, great classes. Con Law 1, Con Law 2. And I love doing it, but I expected sunshine and California weather. Instead, it's like monsoon season. So the question becomes, is that a good thing? Now, it's not a good thing for California. By far has the most homeless people in the country, maybe in North America. I'm not sure what the situation is along the coast in Mexico, but in California, in Los Angeles County, the last time they counted, they had 70,000 people in Los Angeles City and County sleeping on the streets and in homeless encampments. And the unhoused are everywhere in California, from north to south. I have no idea what is happening to these vast tens of thousands of people who began to populate under various suspensions of various laws ordered by the Ninth Circuit some years ago. I have no idea what's going on in their encampments. I haven't been downtown to Skid Row since I got back, Skid Row. But if it's anything like anywhere else, they're going to float away. I have no idea what we are doing for shelter for the unhoused people. It's been cold, it's been windy, but it is raining. Number two, this is very good news for the Central Valley. Long tormented by Sacramento bureaucrats and federal water bureaucrats. Their crops have been destroyed. Their farms have been destroyed. A lot of fields have been left fallow. I drove back and forth through the Central Valley 8 days ago, and I know the signs are still up about what the government has done. This is fabulous for them, and it's recharging groundwater. But of course, the droughtologists, the people who make money by declaring drought and enforcing water sprinkler restrictions, don't want you to think the drought is over. The drought is over. There is no drought in California right now. The question is it going to continue? And if it does, why? The answer will be climate change. I believe in climate change. The earth is warmer and the climate has changed. But the climate doom people, what are they going to say if California's drought is permanently over because of climate change? How do they factor that into their assessment of what's good and bad for the world? Because California is the country's breadbasket. It really is. I mean, the Midwest does a lot of farming too, but California is the golden land of agriculture. What are the climate alarmists going to say if climate change has brought annual rainfall to California that allows its agricultural industry to just explode? I don't know. I'd like to hear from them. Oh, that doesn't matter because Micronesia will be underwater. That might be their answer. I don't think Micronesia will be underwater. I believe the sea levels will go up a couple of inches in some places, maybe a half a foot in other places, and I don't think it's the end of the world. I think people will adapt. But one of the adaptations is, what are we going to do with all this water in California? And what does that mean for the national gross domestic product? What's it mean for agriculture generally? Does it mean desert strips in other parts of the country? Does it mean previously fertile regions don't become fertile? California has been doing its best on a long time. Does the Colorado River recharge? Do the Great Lakes refill? I don't know. But I think the climate people are afraid to tell us. Secondly, racism. I believe the biggest story in the United States not yet covered by legacy media is what happened in Fairfax County high schools, where a pattern in practice has developed that is clearly unconstitutional in my view, of suppressing test results because they benefited Asian American students. We now have 7 high schools. It began as one with a report in the City Journal on December 22nd of last year. They discovered that national merit scores were not being distributed by the principal at Thomas Jefferson School for Science and Technology, which had the effect of disadvantaging Asian American students because they didn't get their national merit awards. They weren't able to put that on their early application for college, and it matters. It matters a lot. It gets you money, it gets you in. In the name of equity, I believe that is the case. We will just put them under oath, put everybody under oath. And everyone thought it was just one wacky school with one wacky principal. 7 schools in one district, in the name of equity, have now been discovered to be suppressing test scores. And the answer to me appears to be, quite obviously, without a doubt, in order to make sure that the Asian American students aren't doing well. That's exactly the case before the United States Supreme Court right now. And come the spring, and I hope it's next week, they're going to rule 6-3 and maybe 7-2, because Justice Kagan knows this stinks too. You may not use race to advantage or injure individuals in America. No matter what your theory is, we never use race. We gave you a pass for 50 years since Bakke. Since I was an undergraduate in 1978, when Bakke was decided, a pass was existing for colleges and only colleges to use race to decide who wins and who loses. And that is going to be done, finished, finito, over. Because the Chief Justice said a long time ago, the way to end discrimination on the basis of race is to end discriminating on the basis of race. Stop looking for ways to create winners and losers on the basis of race. It's unconstitutional. It's also contrary to the statute that is the 1964 Civil Rights Act. I'm going to continue to talk about this. And by the way, national media, you're asleep at the wheel. This is a huge story because if it's happening in Fairfax County, it's happening elsewhere. Go and find out where other Asian American students have been sacrificed on the altar of equity. Coming up, Ridin with Biden. Not such a good idea. Classified documents in that car, maybe. Certainly in his garage. GarageGate next on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Ridin with Biden took a turn for the worse over the last couple of weeks. It was discovered that President Biden has a documents problem, just like President Trump. Classified documents all over the place at his University of Pennsylvania office in Washington, D.C., which co-located with Chinese money. Penn's got its own problem with Chinese money, and I'm getting briefed on that by some Penn alumni as we go along, but Joe Biden's got a big problem there. Then in his garage and then in his home, and they keep finding more documents, and Ridin with Biden is turning into a scandal. James Comer and Jim Jordan are both going to be looking into this. Let's go and listen to what James Comer had to say yesterday, cut number 5.
Well, my concern is that special counsel was called for, but yet hours after that, we still had the president's personal attorneys who have no security clearance still rummaging around the president's residence looking for things. I mean, that would essentially be a crime scene, so to speak, after the appointment of a special counsel. So, we have a lot of questions for the National Archives. We have a lot of questions for the Department of Justice, and hopefully we'll be getting some answers very soon.
He continues, cut number 6.
At the end of the day, my biggest concern isn't the classified documents, to be honest with you. My concern is how there's such a discrepancy in how former President Trump was treated by raiding Mar-a-Lago, by getting the security cameras.
It's a mistake. Now, James Comer's been in Congress for 6 years. I don't believe he's a lawyer. That's a mistake. It is the documents. All right? It is the documents. What's in the documents? That's what matters. Not that they had markings on them indicating they're classified. What was left in unsecure spaces? What was passed around? What was vulnerable? It's why Hillary Clinton shouldn't have had a server in her basement, because the Chinese got into it and they knew everything she was saying and doing and when she was doing it in real time. I've explained that forever. It's what do we protect and why do we protect it? All right, what do you protect the most? Let me ask, what do you protect your most? Your financial stuff. Probably, if you're not a Steelers fan, you're going to protect your financial stuff. You'll pay more attention to those passwords. You'll have them segregated. You're going to hope that whoever you bank with is free of vulnerability to hacking and theft. You protect what is valuable. The classified documents matters more than the disparate treatment between the two presidents. Mar-a-Lago should never have been raided. They should never have done that. That was just abject politicization of the Department of Justice. And by the way, National Archives disputes go on for a very long time. It's a very politicized agency. It is deeply left-wing, and everybody with a brain knows that. They are deeply, deeply left-wing. And so, but James Comer has got to get smarter about this. You focus like a laser on the documents. What was there? That's what you've got to find out first, and you go into the SCIF and you look at them. Because the SCIF is a sensitive compartmented information facility for the benefit of the Steelers fans. You don't want to, if Joe Biden had the daily, there's a lot of overclassification. If he had the daily presidential brief from a day in which nothing was going on and somehow it got mixed up, that's just not criminal. That's just stupid and negligent, and it's on his staff. And the same goes for President Trump. And they might have it classified very, very, very high because of a methods and source disclosure. Don't say anything other than the same standard has got to be applied to both cases, and we got to get to the bottom of this. He did make one good point. This is that we should have federal agents at the president's house in Rehoboth, the president's main house in Delaware, and his house in McLean. And they should be executing a voluntary search, not private individuals, not Bob Bauer, not Hugh Hewitt. Even though we both held clearances at one time, we don't hold them now. So now we need people with clearances to go and look. And if he's not hiding anything, he should welcome them in. There is, however, I do want to recognize the president did give a speech. It's Martin Luther King Day. Have a very good MLK Day. President went to Ebenezer Baptist Church with Senator Warnock and gave a speech yesterday. It wasn't very good. That's unfortunate. Cut number 16. So we'll come back to that after a break. Is cut number 16 frozen, Adam? Okay. We'll come back. Joe Biden gave a Martin Luther King Day speech, which was horrible, even though it wasn't on Martin Luther King Day. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. There's a terrific grand old pod coming up today because Selena Zito's agreed to come back, and we're going to talk about what's happening across the country in local Republican Party organizations, which is not a good sign for 2024 for the Republicans. But that's only available on the Grand Old Pod, which is only available if you subscribe to the Universe. So go to universe.com. Very, 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 very much worth your time. Now, happy Martin Luther King's Day. I know many of you have it off today and you're listening to this on the podcast. I'm playing the third hour as the podcast today because a lot of you didn't go to work today and didn't hear anything. I want you to hear the president went down to Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, pastored in part by Raphael Warnock, now a senator, just won re-election. And he wanted to give a speech honoring Martin Luther King, but he ended up doing the Biden thing, which is to make stuff up. And it's not good. Cut number 16.
Those are the words of Ketanji Brown Jackson, our Supreme Court Justice.
So the president is doing the Biden thing, and Justice Brown Jackson is an African American, and it's appropriate to quote her words. It is not appropriate for the president of the United States not to rehearse, but it gets worse. Now he goes off script. Cut number 17.
I have two political heroes my entire life. When I started off as a 22-year-old kid in the East Side in the Civil Rights Movement.
Stop. Joe Biden was never in the Civil Rights Movement as a 22-year-old kid. That is a lie. He has repeated it before. It has been debunked before. He still says it. It's not in his speech. Everybody knows it's a lie. What is wrong with the president? Then we go to cut number 18.
And let's lay one thing to rest. I may be a practicing Catholic. I used to go to 7:30 Mass every morning in high school and then in college before I went to the black church. Not a joke. Andy knows this.
Not a joke. Does anyone believe that? Now, I want you to listen again to the claims that are made. And to Catholic ears, these are very specific claims. Go ahead, play cut number 18.
And let's lay one thing to rest. I may be a practicing Catholic. I used to go to 7:30 Mass every morning in high school and then in college before I went to the black church.
Okay, now let me begin by giving the president the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he meant every Sunday morning, because I'm here to tell you Joe Biden was not a daily communicant in his high school and college years. I'm just here to tell you that. Not a daily communicant. Those people are special. I want them all to pray for me. Thank you. They're better Catholics than I am by a lot. But I know what the double dip is. I've lived the double dip. The double dip is on, if you're a Catholic and you're also attending a separate church, Fetching Mrs. Hewitt is a Presbyterian, and I do both. But I am a Catholic's Catholic, and I go to the Presbyterian Church. So that meant this weekend, 5 o'clock Mass, and it meant 9 a.m., 5 o'clock Mass on Saturday, and 9 a.m. Mass on 9 a.m. Presbyterian services on Sunday. And that's fine. That's a double dip. I don't doubt that Joe Biden double dipped on occasion. I have in the black church. Maybe a half dozen times in 66 years I've been to a black church service. Maybe he did a lot of that when he was 22. I doubt it. I really do doubt it. I doubt it a lot. I certainly know. It's not plausible that Joe Biden is a daily communicant. It just isn't. So will the media be following up on that? I don't know. But what's it tell you about the president? Slow Joe Biden is infirm. And you know it, and I know it. And he is like I'm going to be in 20 years when I'm 86. I think I'm a little bit sharper at 66 than Joe Biden was. So I'm hoping that but God knows I could be gone tomorrow. Nobody gets any guarantees in this life, which is why you should go to confession. By the way, I have an interesting Catholic story. I went to confession on Saturday, and the priest can't tell you what happened, but I can. And in the course of the conversation, the priest said, "Do you have a favorite saint?" Now, I've been going to confession since second grade, since I was 6 years old. Never, ever asked a question, "Do you have a favorite saint?" And it's part of the penance. And it just ask for the intercession of your blank, blank, blank saint in the penance that you do, which is a fairly standard stuff. And this was not a big deal confession. This was like a 3-minute confession. I had a boring December and January. I can't be mad at Kate, right? I can't get mad at Genghis Kate, so I really can't give in to anger much. But, has any of you ever been asked, do you have a favorite saint? So, I'm caught off guard. I do have a confirmation name, and that was my default, but I thought that's not. So I paused. Well, I guess Francis de Sales. He wrote Introduction to the Devout Life. I've looked at that a couple of times. I guess that, but I never thought about it that way. Different saints for different days, right? St. Michael. There's a part of St. Michael, the Archangel. There's St. Hugh of Lincoln. Very good English bishop. I like him a lot because whatever he wrote, you can actually read. But Francis de Sales is a very smart guy who is very winsome. I could have gone with Cardinal Newman because he fixed the Episcopals and told them what to do, which is they're really Catholics and they ought to just cross the Tiber. But there are a lot of great saints, but I've just never been asked that before. I don't know if that's actually common, but now you can prepare for the test out there. Because maybe that's going around the diocese. So if you're in my diocese, it might be like Fairfax County schools deciding that we're going to introduce a new element, the quiz. Never happened. I don't know how many times I've been to a confession in my life. It's not enough. It's a sacrament, but it's enough that I know that I've never been asked that before. And good priest, by the way. Very, 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 I would guess, in his upper 70s or lower 80s. Very, very smart guy. I've heard him offer mass many, many times. Very good homilist, but threw me a curveball. Sort of like the Ravens not expecting a 98-yard defensive tackle to return to lose the game. Boy, that makes me happy. Sorry, Baltimore, but you are the Ravens, and you did steal my team in 1996, and I don't forget. I want to now play a couple more Biden clips. Chris Christie asked the key question yesterday about the Biden documents, Riding with Biden. Cut number 10. This is Governor Christie on This Week with Jonathan Karl.
If you substituted President Trump for President Biden in the Biden situation, there would be lots of people on the Democratic side who would be jumping to the conclusion that Trump knew it, directed it, and should be held responsible for it. I don't hear that about Biden now. And here's the problem. The problem is he withheld this from the American people for 6 days prior to a midterm election, and I want to know why and who made that decision.
Cooperation versus
That's not cooperation hiding it.
Cooperation is when you call in the National Archives, and the National Archives IG calls the DOJ. That's cooperation. Now, maybe
the documents are the American people's documents. They're the American people's documents, Donna. They deserve to know.
From what I can see, and I can't see everything, but what I can see is that they are cooperating with the archives. They're cooperating with the Department of Justice. They're not putting up red flags and red fences and acting like Mar-a-Lago where you're hiding everything. 11,000 documents. And Donald Trump was forced with a subpoena. So I think it's apples and oranges, the comparison.
Now,
okay?
who decided to hide this fact from the American?
Yeah, who decided to hide it? They knew about it. By the way, they're not the same case. One of these things is not the same. They're different cases, completely different cases, which is why I thought they should both be handled by Jack Smith. But they're both completely different cases. And I expect a whitewash of Joe Biden, and I expect Donald Trump to be indicted. That's what I expect. Maybe I'll be wrong. But if they were given to both Jack Smith, they wouldn't be able to get away with that. But if they give them to different special counsels, they can hope for that. But it's clear. It's just clear that they sent the president's lawyers in and not the FBI for a reason. I mean, it's just so stinky. And it's embarrassing people. Adam Schiff Adam Schiff, of all people, the worst elected official in America. He lied to the American people for 4 years, put us through a couple of impeachments, the least trustworthy member of Congress, and I include George Santos in that. Adam Schiff, cut number 9.
I think the administration will need to answer that question. I'm going to reserve judgment until they do. But I think it's important to point out that the Biden approach was very different in the sense that it looks, as far as we can tell, that it was inadvertent that these documents were in these locations.
Adam Schiff is such a clown. Hey, Generalissimo, are you there? I have a question for you because I've become a Virginian. It looks like you're going to be presented with a ballot in 2024 for the United States Senate that has on it 2 names, Katie Porter and Adam Schiff.
So far, there's a third that's being talked about.
Well, I know, but I think those 2 are going to get to just go with me. If it's the jungle primary and you're down to Adam Schiff and Katie Porter,
yes,
who are you going to vote for?
I may sit that one out.
No, you can't. You can't. I always tell people you're not allowed. It's a moral default. You are defaulting to dumber people than you. You are a well-informed California judge.
I do a write-in.
No, you can't. That's a default. One of those 2 will win. Who is worse?
Adam Schiff is.
Go on. You almost said it.
Adam Schiff is a lying weasel, and Katie Porter is a moron. I can't vote for either one of them.
No, you have. One of them is worse than the other one.
No, they're both equally bad.
No, one of them is worse.
One of the Adam Schiff is worse.
All right, thank you. I agree. I think Adam Schiff put this country through a nightmare, that he looked into the camera and lied repeatedly about Russia, Russia, Russia. Katie Porter is weird and abusive and way left wing.
And his Batgirl.
And his she's a law professor, so she has no contact with reality.
No, and I can't vote for her.
But you have to.
I cannot.
You can't have Senator Schiff. We cannot have Senator Schiff, right? I want Ro Khanna to run. I want Karen Bass to run. I want Eric Garcetti to run.
They're both going to be in the mix.
No, Ro's not going to run.
I'll bet you Karen Bass is in the mix before all's said and done.
Well, if Karen Bass, I'd go for Karen Bass. I would. She's just old-fashioned Paul. And there's no harm.
I don't like her either. But
I don't like her either, but I mean, you're talking about...
But she's the least worst option of the 3.
I'd vote for Eric Garcetti before these 2, but if it's Katie Porter and Adam Schiff, that is going to be the worst choice in the history of gold.
I'm moving.
Virginia's open for business.
So I don't have to take that.
Come back to Virginia, and then you can work a normal shift. Don't go anywhere, America. I'll be right back on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Thank you for listening. I have saved this bit for the very end of today's show because on a federal holiday like Martin Luther King's Day, my home base in Virginia gets up a little bit more slowly. Fewer people are driving to the Pentagon. The bureaucrats are staying home. The critical staff is at the Pentagon, but the bureaucrats are staying home from the Department of Labor and the Office of Personnel Management and the EPA. So traffic isn't as much. And if they go in at all, they're going in now. So the traffic, I want them to hear this. I want them, the Virginians, to hear this. What Governor Glenn Youngkin is doing, along with Attorney General Mayares, in investigating Fairfax County public schools is vitally important. It's a gift Glenn Youngkin doesn't want. It's a gift to Glenn Youngkin because this is a national issue on which he is now in a position and has been in a position and has been leading, in a position to continue to lead, to expose and explain why the practice of the Fairfax County Public School is antithetical to the American founding, to the 14th Amendment, and to the 1964 Civil Rights Act. We do not award benefits and we do not punish people based upon their race, their ethnicity, their gender, their creed, their sexual orientation. We do not discriminate. But the number one third rail of American politics, the one that brought about a civil war and then another 80 years of struggle, and the struggle goes on in some places where racism remains, is against the use of race to award bonuses and benefits or to inflict penalties and sentences. What Fairfax County schools, at least 7 of them, appear to have been doing in withholding national merit scores from those who benefited from those scores to their injury, because those scores are worth money. They get you scholarships. All right. So you understand, by withholding the scores, it's not getting a participation ribbon in Little League. It's a big deal. It's a difference maker in a kid's life. Those scores were withheld in the name of equity. That is the reasonable conclusion. And Glenn Youngkin is going to investigate the heck out of this, and he's going to stop it in Fairfax County. He's going to stop it everywhere. And he has a unique opportunity, and it's very unique on this Martin Luther King Day, to explain that Dr. King was right. Judge us on the content of our character, not the color of our skin. Judge us by objective measures. How hard are we working? There are 2 objective measures for a student's academic potential. One is their class rank, and the other is a standardized test score. And God has so willed it that some people can take tests better than others. That is not inequitable. That is a objective differentiation. It is not one based, by the way, on race. It is one based largely on work habit. Secondly, grade point average. That is also not one based upon race, and it can indeed cut across. And those 2 factors are the only factors you need for college admissions. But the test scores have to be made available, and the means of comparing them have to be made available. And what I think Fairfax County was doing was hiding the national merit test scores because they were overwhelmingly going to Asian Americans. The awards, the National Merit Semifinalist distinction, which is very rare, very hard to get, a marker of inevitable academic success, I think they were going in disproportionate numbers. And that doesn't mean wrong. It just means maybe the Asian Americans were making up 50% of the school and they were getting 90% of the national merit certificates. Whatever it is, what they were doing is illegal and unconstitutional. And Glenn Youngkin, if he gets to the bottom of it and really digs it out and explains it, can run for president on that basis, just like Ron DeSantis is doing that in Virginia. I'm going to talk about that more with Selena Zito, by the way. Look fabulous. Thank you for joining us on Skype. Selena, you brought up a name that I want people to know more about, David Urban. And David Urban is in your column on local politics. I want you to explain what the column is and why you went to David Urban, because I think he's one of the smartest people in American politics.
Well, David Urban has been in Pennsylvania politics since about 1990. He's from Aliquippa, Western Pennsylvania, and he worked for Arlen Specter. For years, he was his chief of staff. And so he sort of dealt with when Pat Toomey ran against Specter in 2004 in that primary and almost beat him. He was also had a front row seat to when Donald Trump ran in the primary. And a lot of people didn't think he was conservative enough. So he's been in the crosshairs of movement politics, which is why I thought it was really important to put him in my story about what's going on in Western Pennsylvania.
And what's going on in Western Pennsylvania is the struggle for control of local Republican parties, which are in California, they're elected, right? That's what you do. You run for the Central Committee, then the Central Committee elects a county chairman. How are they run in Pennsylvania? Because it sounds like a wild rodeo. And if that's going on in Western Pennsylvania, I imagine it's going on across the country.
Yeah, so they are elected. However, y'all got to read the story. Go to selenazito.com. It's right there. They some of them changed the name of the party. Some of them were overtaken by a third, like there's a third party, and then there's a fourth faction in the party. So you had all that turbulence in there. And what happens is the majority, the quote unquote establishment, normal Republicans who have done all the grunt work to get, in particular, Butler and Washington counties to flip from Democrat registered counties to Republican registered counties. And in Washington County, for the first time ever, they elected a Republican. Their row offices are now all Republican. So it's not as though they're not effective. They've changed the registration. They have brought new people into the party. They've gotten Republicans elected. Unfortunately, with these patriot groups, there's a lot of them that have a litmus test that begins with Donald Trump won 2020. And that's just not the case.
This is what I want people to understand. And selinazito.com is where you can go to read her. And I just tweeted out this most recent column as well. Selena writes for so many different features. I don't know which one this is in. The New York Post, the Washington Examiner, Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I don't know. Selena just writes. But I thought she does get down to the grassroots. And these sorts of upheavals, what Urban said, really resonated with me. The party's been this before. We did this in 1974. We did this in 1964. We're doing it right now. And the energy of the new people is great. But the disruption, if they don't know what they're doing, they'll drive the car. It's like the new driver, right? If you don't know how to drive a party, you go over the edge.
That is the challenge that they have, because they don't know all the things that you need to do to have an effective party. You have to have a good mail-in ballot program. You have to have voter registration. You have to have a robust Lincoln Day dinner. In Washington County, they're going to have a wrestler at the Lincoln Day dinner. I mean, that's just, and that couple in St. Louis that got in trouble with the gun, that's who their speakers are. And I don't think that draws new people to the party. I think what that does is pushes people away.
Well, yes, and what it does to the regular. And by the way, I like to refer to the base. I would love to have a Selena column on who is the base, because everyone claims to be the base. So I've developed a definition. You have to have voted Republican for 5 elections in a row and done something besides vote in 5 elections. So you just can't call yourself the base by showing up. And you just can't call yourself the base because you're wearing a Tea Party Patriot sticker. Do you think there's some legitimate room for a definition that sticks there?
Maybe. I really don't know. There's so much turmoil right there. Now, again, these parties tend to come back together. Look what happened with Toomey in 2010. He did win. He did. The Tea Party emerged. That energy from 2004 that was just granular, in 6 years, grew and placed him in office. What I think is interesting, the first gentleman that I talked to in the story said, he was all about Pat Toomey, and he went to those internet meetup parties to go listen to other like-minded people. Now he says, I'd never vote for Toomey. And I'm like, he's a conservative.
It is truly strange what's going on in the grassroots. You know what I would love, Selena? I don't know what your schedule is like today, but Monday at 9 a.m., I'm going to take the Grand Old Pod. If you're around, I'd love to talk to you about this, because this is really inside baseball at the grassroots level. It's a great column. It's the kind of column that only Selena Zito writes. So you got to go to selinazito.com or go find my Twitter. Are you going to go back to Twitter, Selena?
I don't know.
Yeah, you don't need it, huh? No, you don't need it?
I mean,
that's too bad. I want people to read selinazito.com. She actually knows what's going on in politics. Thank you for joining us, Selena. You look fabulous for 6 o'clock in the morning, so I think that's great. Don't go anywhere, America. I'll be right back on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Josh Krashauer with Axios. He's got a great story out right now called the GOP's 2024 Freeze. Good morning, Josh. How are you?
Good morning, Hugh.
Now, I've just teased your great story on Axios, and now I'm not going to talk about it. I'm going to talk to you instead about the Fairfax County scandal and the suppression of the national merit commendations, which began at 1 school, then became 3 schools. When I talked to Glenn Youngkin last week, is now up to 7 schools. Are you following this?
Well, Hugh, I live in Fairfax County. I grew up in Fairfax County, so I have a deep familiarity about the issue at hand. And look, Fairfax County has always been something of at least until the last 5 years, has been a swing area. Now it's Democratic, but it's a moderate Democratic area. And the school system was always based on having the best schools in the country. Excellence was the motto in Fairfax. And in 2019, the school board slate that won, the Democratic-endorsed school board slate, ran instead on equity. That was the motto. You saw it on signs across the area. And what we're seeing, and this is one example of what's going on, is you're seeing evidence that in school systems across the country, or sorry, schools in the schools in Fairfax, including the number one school in the country, the Thomas Jefferson School of Science and Technology, they've been taking measures to essentially downgrade their excellence. They're not highlighting the highest achievers in the school system. We saw this during COVID. There were a lot of instances where Jefferson is under fire because they changed its admissions policy. They got rid of the high standards in its test that would allow the top students to get into the school in favor of some kind of racial balancing. So this is a big issue. It goes beyond just the merit scholars that didn't get notified in the school system, but it's about this emphasis on equity over merit.
And that the reason I'm focused on this is what begins in Fairfax County doesn't stay in Fairfax County. There are some elite school districts around the United States, and that's one of them. Now I've got a handle to grab onto. What does equity mean? Equity means not telling people, specifically the Asian American students who did very well on the national merit test, that they did very well. Has it made it into the national media yet, Josh, other than on my show? I'm following it intensely because I think parents are going to lose their minds if they find out that their high schools did this.
Well, look, education was one of the big factors that got Governor Youngkin into the governor's mansion. It was a whole slew of educational issues, the school closures during COVID, some kind of elements of radical curriculum seeping into the schools, but equity was a big factor too. The fact that Thomas Jefferson, the number one school in the country, a magnet school, got rid of its high stakes admissions test in favor of quotas, racial quotas, essentially, to balance the diversity balance the ethnic population in the school. Very unpopular, created a groundswell of opposition. And I think what we're seeing here, Hugh, is another example, another possible bullet point in this equity agenda. Parents,
but what I'm getting at is, you're a parent, right? Are you concerned about this? I mean, do you see this engulfing school systems and injuring your children?
I see this in fits and starts. I don't think it's endemic, but I think you're right to note that once something is kind of in the bloodstream, so to speak, it can spread we saw this during the pandemic, and a lot of very unusual ideas kind of creeped into the school system. That was one of the issues, again, that Governor Youngkin talked about during the 2021 campaign. And it had an audience not just of conservatives, but of independents, of moderates. There's school board elections, by the way, Hugh, throughout Virginia, in Fairfax County, Loudoun County. That's going to be a really interesting data point into how much of a backlash there is to this equity movement.
Now, this is where I want to conclude, Josh. And by the way, the GOP's 2024 freeze, the long and the short is people got to know what DeSantis is doing before they start doing what they want to do, right?
That's exactly right. They want to see if he's a formidable force in the Republican Party or a paper tiger, and they don't know. So far, so good.
I notice you mentioned this book, Mike Pompeo's book, the new memoir, Never Give an Inch. It's the most explosive and best memoir of the Trump years. Have you read it yet?
I have not. I'm looking forward to it. But I know the Secretary of State is going to be, I guess it's coming out in about a week, and he's going to be going around the country talking about something.
Yeah, don't bring a knife to a gunfight in the memoir wars. I mean, that's it. But I want to go back. Go ahead.
No, I'm sure, but what are the big revelations?
Oh, I can't tell you because it's embargoed.
Okay.
Okay, so you know the rules. But I will. There are a lot of stories. It's going to make a lot of news. Josh, has any national network or legacy media outlet focused on the Northern Virginia scandal yet? Like everyone's covering the documents, Joe Biden's documents. I want to know if this has traction in the national media yet.
Well, look, the Washington Post actually has covered it in recent days. So the Metro section, at least, the front page of the local section of the Washington Post, which, I think is notable because it was a little bit slow on the uptick in some of the other educational related controversies that were mentioned on the campaign trail in Virginia.
I think it's an enormous story. We finally have a vision of what equity means, and it means hurting Asian Americans. That's what it means. And we're going to continue talking about that. Josh Kroshauer on Twitter. Read him at Axios. Thank you, Josh. Always a pleasure to see you on a Monday morning. I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned.